The town of Scituate's May election will happen on May 22nd in the high school gym from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. You can also vote now with an absentee ballot available at Town Hall. But no matter which way you vote, one thing will be the same. This is your ballot. Several names appear on here. All of them are uncontested except one, and it is one of the most talked about committees here in town, the school committee. On the ballot, incumbent Michael Long and the competition Richard Taft. Each candidate agreed to sit down with Scituate TV on a closed set to answer questions about the pandemic, diversity, equity, and inclusion, the school budget, and more. And right now, it is your time to meet Mike Long. Mike Long, thanks for being here. After hours, closed set. We have a lot to talk about here, but first I want to give you that chance to introduce yourself and explain why you are rerunning for school committee.
Thanks for having me, Seth. My name's Mike Long. I'm running for my fourth term on the school committee. When I first started running for school committee in the neighborhood that I live in, we had 30 kids under the age of 13. And one of the things that I wanted to be able to do, especially as my kids were going into the schools, was having a way to be a representative of that group. As I've been on the school committee and have met more staff and additional people across town, getting that feedback and being able to be a voice for those people has been extremely important to me. I moved to Scituate in 2007 when I got married. It's funny because when I was a kid, my aunt Sally Butler had taught at both Hatherley and Jenkins, and I remember coming into Hatherley and helping her set up her room, and then 20 years later, my daughter is going into that same classroom. So it's one of those things that, I'm glad I was able to help her then and kind of hear what she had always taught in Scituate, and then be able to, be that next generation of coming in and really trying to be a voice for the people in my, in my neighborhood and across the town. One of the biggest things that I always look at as a member of the school committee, and I make a vote on anything that impacts our staff and our students, is this in the best interest of our children? And then question 1A after that is immediately, how does that impact our staff, and how can we help everyone within the school district, continue to move forward and grow and have that opportunity to succeed throughout the school year, and then after they get that diploma and graduate from the Scituate Public Schools. In the job that I'm in now, I do product management for an IT/banking company, and in my role, I do product management, and I have clients across 5 different countries and across 20 states in the United States. So being able to see that diversity in my own job, especially in the past year where there have been incidents that occurred in the district, and just looking at the different perspectives coming in as we went through the COVID scenario, the COVID issues of do we do hybrid versus full-time learning, has definitely helped me to take in that information, analyze it, and then make a decision that, again, is in the best interest for our community.
So if re-elected, obviously there's a lot on your agenda that you're concerned about, but for time's sake, just give us like two priorities, like 2 things you really want to focus on should you be re-elected.
Yep. So I think one of the first things is the curriculum. As we go through and we come back from having almost a full year of being out of school full-time, I think it's really important to me that we take that deep dive back into the curriculum and make sure that our kids continue to grow and are ready to succeed in all of the classes that they take in our schools. In our meeting on April 26th, the department chairs had come in and given us a good explanation of how we're continuing to move forward now that we're back full-time. But 2 of the questions I asked was, okay, what can we do in order to make sure that our students have the ability to go and get that extra help, either through online learning or some kind of services that we can provide, and at the same time for the students that are ready to continue on and push themselves a little bit further, have those opportunities, either, again, online learning or additional materials that they can read and continue to grow with. One of the other things that I think is extremely important is, we've begun conversations, and we're a finalist with the MSBA for potentially opening a new elementary school. We've seen a lot of great growth in students and opportunities available through the new Gates building, and continuing to look forward and provide our students with a great learning experience, I think is something important that we should also continue to look at, both from a educational perspective, but also that fiscally responsible perspective of, if we can get money from the MSBA and not put the entire burden on the town, then it'll help us make it an easier sell to get approved and completed.
Let's talk about the biggest topic of the year, COVID-19 pandemic. It wreaked havoc on this past school year. I mean, look, school started normally, the pandemic kicked in and went all remote. Then we switched to this hybrid model where kids were filtering in school, then out of school. Now we're at this point where it's either you're all in, meaning you're in school, or you're all remote. So we know the state gave us some guidance, but the majority of responsibility fell on the individual school administrations. How do you think our school administration dealt with the pandemic?
So we were in an extremely interesting perspective because we had just brought in a new superintendent. And one of the first things he did just right off the gate was he was extremely transparent with both our staff and our community. You know, it was interesting because we used to go from having 10 people at a school committee meeting to all of a sudden we had 500 people on a Zoom wanting to hear, you know, what is the plan, how are we going to move forward? And it's, you know, people from both sides, staff raising their concerns, families saying, you know, let's just go back. And I think our superintendent and our administration did a great job of getting that information, creating subcommittees that combined key stakeholders from both sides and saying, okay, you know, what's the best interest of our schools? The superintendent always said, go slow to go fast. And one of our biggest concerns was how can we get, you know, a great education for our students, but at the same time, not open the schools, have a health scare, and then have to close them again. So starting off being hybrid, I know it was hard on some families. I mean, I definitely felt it having kids in 2 different schools, but I think they did a great job there and just continuing to help us move forward, working with staff to resolve issues that, you know, they saw in the schools, keeping our students and staff safe with the PPE that they ordered and having things like additional hand sanitizer and sinks in the classrooms. I think Superintendent Burkhead and Dr. Dutch, our business manager, did a great job of working with the funding that we received from the CARES Act to spend every dime in a way that we knew we would be reimbursed, but also can work with making sure that from a capital perspective, our buildings are safe, the air ventilators are working well, and then also, again, having that PPE to be able to move forward.
Sure.
And now that we're back full time, you know, we had a good plan walking in. Staff were involved in being able to, you know, raise concerns. And I think one of the most important things we could do for COVID, and then even for everything we do from a school committee perspective, is that transparency. Having slideshows and documentation on our website that showed this is how a classroom will look, this is how your kid will walk through the school, and really making sure that the community felt comfortable and also making sure that everyone is safe.
Good. You talked about moving forward. Let's look to the school year 2021-2022. What sort of model do you think we should adopt?
So because the state is doing well, right now, sitting here on May 8th, I would expect us to be able to open up in a full-time model the same way that we're in school right now. Obviously, if things change, the superintendent knows that he has the school committee support to look at safety first, and if we do need to, you know, pull back, and if something happened tomorrow, you know, God forbid, at the same time he knows to do ultimately what's safe for our students while also continuing to give them a strong education. So ideally, you know, we work through the summer, we make sure again that we're keeping the school building safe and ready to go, but that we're full-time both you know, in the schools and then allowing more kids to take the bus, allowing everyone to, you know, do the extracurricular things like sports that you know, will benefit them.
Got it. Got it. Looking at next year, New York City Public Schools. This is not. I did not give you this. This is not a gotcha question. Do not worry about that. They just announced that starting next year, they are canceling any idea of snow days because the remote model worked so well. So let's say the school administration comes to you, the school committee, and says the remote model works well. We're doing away with snow days completely. How would you vote? Yes or no?
So ironically, a couple of years ago, Massachusetts had an idea called a blizzard bag, which would have allowed schools to not take a snow day, but at the same time, kids were able to work remotely at home, and it would still continue to work as a school day. You know, depending on what the plan was coming from the state, I mean, if it made sense and it would allow us to, you know, have school, as long as, I mean, to me, the biggest thing is the equity of it. So making sure everyone has electronic devices so they can log in. Typically, if we have a large snowstorm, I mean, you know, half the town doesn't have power. So if something like that happened or we hit a certain threshold, making sure that our students, you know, don't lose a day or don't start falling behind just because of where they live in town.
Got it.
Sorry, just where you going? A couple of years ago when we had that, I voted in favor of it, and I think it could benefit us, especially where if we do hit so many snow days based on our school calendar, we don't want to be going up to the end of the year and getting out at the end of June, or trying to look at, what days can we make fit just to get out by the state mandated June 30th.
Got it.
And sorry, just to expand on that in your last question, I know there's been a lot of push down from the Department of Education and from the state on what we should be doing. And I know that's at a macro level, but I do think one of the things that the district has done well is what's good for Scituate. At the end of the day, what is going to help our students and our staff succeed? And to me, that's getting the feedback and the guidance and how other towns have done or handled certain situations is important. But at the same time, we need to look at Scituate and do what's best for us as a community.
Sure. One last question, pandemic, and we'll move past that topic. I've visited all of the schools for a variety of projects. I've seen and talked to a lot of the teachers. They're frustrated. They're exhausted. Have we and are we asking too much of our teaching staff?
So our staff has done tremendous work over the past year, just in trying to keep our kids moving forward. And I know this has been a huge burden on them in terms of, their daily lives, childcare. For teachers that live in other school districts and their district might have a different model, obviously, it's a huge impact on them and their families. I think we need to continue to move forward just to make sure that we can get back to that sense of normalcy in the schools as much as we can. But one thing that I do think is important, either through our school committee meetings or through their principals or their union, that they're coming back to the administration with those concerns and with those issues so that we can address them across the board, and whether it's staffing from a budget perspective or from a curriculum perspective, things that they're seeing that's causing those concerns. But and hearing from our staff is one of the most important things we can hear from, because it is their job, and we need to make sure that we give them all of the tools to succeed, and also not feel burnt out or feel like they have to leave the industry, because again, they've done an amazing job over the past year, and we want to keep them in our district.
Let's go back to school administration, specifically the superintendent, Bill Burkhead. Essentially, the school committee, you're his boss, right? I mean, he reports to you. So, superintendent, what's he doing well, and what can he improve on?
So I think one of the biggest things he's done well is, and he's done this through COVID and returning to school, is just reaching out to the community, talking to staff and community members, and really trying to take in the town. He didn't come in and try to say, okay, this is how I've done things in the past as a principal. This is how my prior districts did it, so this is how I'm going to do it moving forward. He's really taken the time to analyze Scituate and make decisions based on that. And he's gotten a lot of good feedback from the school committee, just in terms of, well, this is what we did 5 years ago, and this is how the community responded. And he's taken that well as he's gone through and done his review and made recommendations to us as a school committee. I think, especially in today's climate, one of the biggest things we need to continue to do is just have that transparency. I mean, these are our children that are in the schools. It's their lives. They go to school, they go to work, they do sports, but I mean, school is that big thing in their lives, and just having that transparency to be able to say, hey, look, we know this issue happened, or we want to celebrate this aspect that the children are doing, so that we can just continue to have that, that transparency and that openness with the community, so that they know, things aren't being done in a vacuum, and I'm not saying they are, but knowing full well what's happening in our schools and being able to have confidence in both the school committee and the administration.
While we're talking evaluations, let me ask you to evaluate the school committee. Yourself, Peter Gates, Janice Lindblom, Mike Hayes, Nicole Brandolini. What is the committee doing well, and what do you guys need to improve on?
So one of the things that we had created a subcommittee for communication a couple of years ago, and it's been on and off again as one of those things that we've tried to do. I think as a school committee, being able to communicate out is important. One of the things that we're stuck dealing with is obviously the open meeting laws that Massachusetts has. We're not going to do anything in a vacuum or behind the scenes, but we want to be able to make sure that we can have that collaboration to be able to share information out to the community. So whether it's through our own Facebook pages, I know a couple of years ago, one member of the school committee, who's no longer on the school committee, had tried to do like a coffee hour in the schools with the community. I think obviously it's, we would want that community, as long as the community wants it, just being able to reach out, I think, is important and something that we should continue to just expound on, so that, again, people don't think we're working in a vacuum. Again, because we've had as many as 500 people in a school committee meeting this year, there's been a lot more information that we've been able to get out and people have been able to hear firsthand. Obviously with social media, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, there's a lot of things that get posted, and sometimes it's not, either it doesn't have all the information, or but we can't all respond immediately and say, hey, this is this is the answer, because if 3 of us respond, it violates the open meeting law, and we obviously don't want to jeopardize that trust with the town or with the community as a whole.
Other big topic this year, diversity, equity, and inclusion. School administration recently hired its first director, a DEI director, Jamil Adams. 2 things. Talk about how important this position is and what you expect from Mr. Adams within the first year in this role.
So I'm very excited that Mr. Adams has started this week. I think it's going to be an incredible asset to our community, just in terms of that outside view that he brings in. It's not focused on curriculum. It's not focused on one specific school. He's coming in and he's bringing that new lens that I think will just add a more well-rounded community and education to our students. I do think over the course of the next year, he should be out there, not necessarily in the public, but just reaching out on a regular basis to say, hey, this is what's going on. I would like to see him continue to, also just be a part of our school committee meetings. Just, being there to either help answer questions or provide additional context on, a report that the superintendent might bring. Unfortunately, there are issues that occur either in Scituate or neighboring towns. I mean, obviously, the Duxbury football team had an issue a couple of months ago. We've had issues internally in town, and we want the community to know that the children are safe in the schools. We also want children to be able to come into the schools knowing that whether they're coming from the West End or Peggotty, whether they come from a different social economic status as other members of the community, that when they walk through that door, whether it's they walk in with the same knowing the same thing, that they are that they're respected, that they deserve every opportunity that the student either walking in behind them or ahead of them has, and that if they don't feel comfortable in any sense, that they should be reaching out to either a guidance counselor or a principal, or through their parents, to make sure that they are that equality exists within the school.
On the DEI topic, I want to talk specifically about gender identity, all right? And specifically teaching being transgender. And I bring this up because at a recent school committee meeting, there was a very heated and emotional, you were in this, emotional discussion, conversation, when a father brought up his concerns about his young daughter, who is in the Scituate public school system, learning about being transgender. And he felt, A, she was too young, and B, that he would rather teach her as opposed to a teacher teaching his child. So when it comes to gender identity, who should be teaching the youth here in Scituate? Should it be parents, teachers, and if teachers, at what age or what grade?
So I think everything has to be age specific, and if something's done in the schools. I mean, if you're a kindergartner and you have a fellow student who has 2 moms or 2 dads, obviously the kids know that and understand that, and really the kindergarten teachers should go as far as Johnny has 2 dads and both love them equally, and he comes from a loving household, and there's no difference in Johnny as there is in the next kid in the class. Anytime that we do talk about something this important, I think it is important that we do reach out to the parents of the families that are impacted and just say, hey, look, we're going to have this conversation in school. This is how we're going to direct it. I mean, to me, technically it's a political office, but the school committee is not a political identity. Again, it should be what's the most important thing for our students. And if we are going to have those conversations, it should really involve the community, involve resources, and just give a well-rounded, open discussion. I've had students come up to me, or parents come up to me and say, this is being talked about among students, and if there is that conversation in the schools, it shouldn't just be, hey, I saw this on YouTube, or I saw this on some website, mm-hmm. And it might not be a full depiction of the topic, and really, helping to drive that conversation, or at least reaching out to parents and saying, hey, look, this is occurring in the schools. If you don't want us to teach about it, that's fine, but here's some resources that might help explain the conversation to your children. Not forcing anything, not trying to skew it to one side or the other, but just, because of the conversations we see and we hear in the schools, this is something you might want to have a conversation with your children about.
With technology, specifically internet, we know racism, homophobia, sexism, it happens. When it happens here in town, and it is happening here in town, and it involves Scituate students, and specifically students producing content that sort of promotes these the racism, homophobia, sexism, and when it's produced, but it's not necessarily on a school network, any sort of social platform, what role do you think the school administration should play in educating and disciplining?
I mean, kids are in a much different environment than when either one of us was in high school. I mean, I graduated from Rockland in 2002. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have my own laptop. I wasn't on the internet. And you know, if I saw things, it was because I either saw it in the newspaper or on the news, or I heard about it from others. And now it's right at kids' fingertips. It's so easy to get to. And one of the things that we do need to continue to educate our children on is, you know, what's the best way to go out and find a resource to, or what are the best sources out there to look at? I mean, if, you know, a sports star posts something on Instagram, you know, that carries a lot of weight with kids who are a fan of that person or an actor or whoever. I attended a civics session that the town Democratic and Republican committees had put together, and one of the things that the 8th grade teachers had mentioned was, when we do a project, what we do is we provide students with one of the websites that they provide the students gives both sides of the story. This is, you know, and again, keeping politics out of it. If the you know, whatever the topic is, this is one side of it, but here's the other side, and it allows them to look at things from both angles to make that well-rounded decision.
Get it. Let's skip to the budget. Some people love the budget. Some people find it very boring. The school committee budget is a novel. I mean, it's a line by line item. I've tried to look at it. I get totally blurred. I don't necessarily have to focus on it. You as a school committee member do. So for time's sake, 3 elements that you think moving forward need to really, that you're focused on or you think need to be addressed.
So we're obviously a public school. One of the things that we've done over the past couple of years, and I'm glad to say that we have been able to do, and I've been a part of, is eliminating some fees. Starting this year, we eliminated the full-day kindergarten fee because at the beginning of the year it was a half-day program with the kids only being there either in the morning or the afternoon. The superintendent was able to just remove that fee entirely from next year's budget, and I'm glad he did. I think we need to continue to look at ways to eliminate the busing fees, sports fees for families. I think staffing is also an important aspect. We need to make sure that the student-to-staff ratio is at a place that's level and helps provide the best learning experience for our students. A couple of years ago, John McCarthy, who was then the superintendent, had talked a lot about, well, this is the ideal class size for a K-2, and we had aimed to, you know, build our budget around that kind of, or our staffing levels around that kind of classroom. I think that's something we need to continue to do across the board at all 3 schools, so that we don't have, and across, especially at the elementary level, making sure that Wampatuck has the same type of staffing levels as like a Jenkins, because even though there's a different number of students in each school, we don't want one class to have 24 kids, and just because I'm in another school, I can have 16. So I think continuing to look at the staffing levels across the board is important, and then curriculum, making sure that, you know, because the world changes pretty much daily, you know, as we look at new programs to introduce to kids to make sure that they are able to either get just a taste of something, whether it's robotics or coding. A couple of years ago, then Principal Wargo had actually flown to China and helped create the Mandarin program with Kate Shula in our World Languages Department. So being able to continue to analyze what's going on in the world, but then have that flexibility to integrate a program like that if it makes sense, so that our students, you know, depending on what they want to learn about, you know, they get a taste of it in the schools, and then are able to know what they want to do in the future.
The main goal here of the school committee, of course, are students, the welfare of those students. So I wanted to make sure we got a student voice in here too. So I grabbed a camera and I asked some students what they have questions they may have for the candidates. Here's your question.
Hi, I'm Kyle. I'm a senior at the high school, and I want to know what the school committee does exactly.
So there you have it. I mean, look, sometimes the most basic question is the most obvious one. I should have even just started that way. Okay, look, what's the school committee do?
And so there are 3 main topics that the school committee is responsible for. It's setting the policy and the mission statement for our district. It's hiring and evaluating our superintendent, and it's approving the budget. Our town charter is pretty hard set in terms of we get 2/3 of the town budget after any shared costs. So the dollar amount we get is, pretty well determined by the charter. But those are the big three pieces that we're responsible for. But at the same time, we're that voice of the community. We're responsible for making the decisions that ultimately impact every student that goes through our schools and every family. So whether it's, when does school start? What sports do we offer? How do we make sure these kids are ready to leave Scituate Public Schools and, just be able to succeed in life? I mean, really, Mike Hayes says this all the time, and I completely agree with him. I mean, we're morally bound to help these kids and get them to that next place in their lives. And I mean, to me, that's more important than, just looking at policy. It's really looking at, the children's lives and getting that feedback from the community because, my kids are in 2 schools, but it's very important to hear things from other schools in the community to know, this is going on in our school. How can we fix it, improve on it? If it's something that's working great in other schools, adopt it. In one school, adopt it in the other, so that it's, it's equitable. I think I half joke about this a lot, but the 2 best parts of our school committee meetings are celebrating student success and the student report. We've had some great students providing us feedback from on what's going on in the schools over the past couple of years, and especially this year with COVID and some of the DEI stuff that's come up in our schools. They provided a huge amount of knowledge because they walked in and said, "This is what I saw in my school," in the emotion and the just how they walked in. It spoke volumes. So being able to see that and be able to respond to it in a way that ideally benefits them at the end of the day, that's what we're responsible for, outside of just those 3 items that I mentioned at the beginning.
Final question. This is your surprise question. You ready? Who's one of your favorite teachers and why?
That is a great question.
I can give you some time.
I'm assuming you're talking in Scituate.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Oh man, that's
Or no, from your past, like the teacher you remember that had an impact on you.
So like I said, I grew up in Rockland. My soccer coach was also my 8th grade history coach, and I was my 8th grade history teacher. And I remember more from the soccer field than I do from that 8th grade history class.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times I hear from students, this teacher was awesome because of this, or because of, this little lesson they taught me. So, I mean, I think all of our teachers do an amazing job, and just, they teach the curriculum, but at the same time, they do that little bit more that really help our kids just feel like they're a part of the school. They see themselves in the classroom. They do the extra little bit, either attending. I mean, one of my daughter's teachers attended her dance recital a couple years ago, and it just made such a huge difference for her to be able to say, my teacher was there outside of the classroom. And I mean, to me, because our teachers do that, I think it makes a huge difference in our school.
It's great. It's great. Okay, last element, tell everyone why you are the best candidate for you, and if they have questions, how they can touch base with you.
So again, my name is Mike Long. I did create a Facebook page, Mike Long for Scituate School Committee, where I put my cell phone number, my email address, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that people do send. I've gotten a number of questions so far, and while I was kind of hoping this would be an uncontested race, it's brought out a lot of questions that we haven't necessarily seen in the school committee over the past couple of years, or past couple of months, that they bring them back to the forefront, and it's making an impact to me because it's this is still out there in the community for whatever reason, and we should be addressing it. Obviously, COVID took up a lot of our time, but that doesn't mean that school stopped, that other issues weren't continuing to occur, and we need to continue to move those forward. I do, being on the committee for 9 years, I've had a lot of experience just in terms of, how have we done things in the past? What are the best ways that we can continue to improve things for our students, and bring that experience in, especially with a brand new administration, I think is going to add a wealth of knowledge. I was a huge proponent of the DEI position when we started having those conversations and opening the position earlier this year. I still think it's a great position that we have in our school, and it's going to provide our kids a well-rounded, or just improve the well-roundedness of the education that they receive. I also, I strongly believe that, we put this in our mission statement earlier this year, and we updated some of our school committee policies to reflect this, but that we do need to make sure that we look at some of the issues that we're having in our school, whether it's around race or gender identity, and we continue to make sure that at the highest level, we make sure that students know that coming into the schools, they should feel as equal as every other person that comes through our doors. We've been very fortunate in the sense that we've been a part of the METCO program since it started in 1966, and we have over 100 METCO students, or around 100 METCO students in our schools today. And bringing in that diversity, I think, is helpful to our students. I mean, we attend graduation, and one of the things that, the METCO kids walk through, and they have the tassels on their gowns, and, they're laughing, and they're as much of the crowd of students that live in Scituate as anyone else. And being able to, to see that and to bring as much diversity into our schools as we can, I think is extremely important in terms of, the education that our kids receive. We don't want to force one idea on students over another, but we do want to make sure that, kids do understand, whether it's, using a resource that has that shows both sides, or just telling our kids, hey, Wikipedia is a great source, but it's not the best source. Here's the best ways to dive in and, really analyze an issue, I think is, going to be something that's important that I'm going to continue to push if I am reelected on May 22nd.
Perfect. Mike Long, thanks for coming in. Thanks for doing this with us.
Thanks, Seth.
Good luck. Good luck. And remember, the election is May 22nd, the high school gym from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Absentee voting is happening now.